Yes, hello. My name is Gio Rutherford, and I'm working with Great Lakes Now to bring you a few spooky Great Lakes stories. Lake Superior has a reputation for holding on to her dead. You're probably familiar with shipwrecks like the Edmund Fitzgerald, but there's a shipwreck called the SS Kamloops that has a permanent resident that divers still visit to this day. In December 1927, the last time that anyone saw the Kamloops is when it disappeared into a winter gale completely covered in ice. The shipwreck was discovered in 1977, and divers were surprised when they came across an inhabitant in the boiler room. Lake Superior is incredibly cold, and it experiences a lot of ice in the winter. Because of that, if a person dies in Lake Superior, their body is preserved in an extraordinary way. A chemical reaction happens between the skin and the surrounding freshwater called saponification. This creates a waxy, soapy substance called adipocere. And old Whitey, who's an inhabitant in the boiler room, has been there for almost 100 years and he's still perfectly preserved, surrounded by this soapy substance. In June 1950, an airline went missing, and it's probably at the bottom of Lake Michigan. Northwest Orient Airline 2501 went missing on its flight from New York City to Minneapolis. There were 58 people aboard. It was an extremely common flight, and they had done this many times before. However, there was a storm brewing on Lake Michigan, and the pilot called in requesting a drop in altitude, which was denied. By the morning of the next day, the flight had not checked in Milwaukee and it was declared missing. Despite efforts from the Coast Guard and many people who have searched for this flight since then, no one has ever found it at the bottom of Lake Michigan. It's hard to imagine today, but in the 1800s and early 1900s, people used to walk out below the Niagara Falls onto the ice. The ice was around 8 feet thick, and people would walk on it between the United States and Canada, right below the Horseshoe Falls. Now, the Niagara Falls has a history of death, from the people who risked their lives taking handmade barrels over the edge, to the 5,000 or so people that have died there in recent memory. But in 1912, there was around 35 people on the ice between the two countries. Out of nowhere, the ice cracked and people scrambled to get to either shore. Unfortunately, 3 people got stuck on an ice raft as the entire ice field broke apart and they drifted down the Niagara River. Unfortunately, the Niagara River becomes rapids and eventually the Niagara Whirlpool, and all 3 people trapped on these ice rafts disappeared and were never seen again. There's a lighthouse on a rock in the middle of Lake Superior. Standard Rock Lighthouse is also called the loneliest place in the world. And that's because it's 24 miles from the Keweenaw Peninsula, making it the farthest lighthouse from any shore in North America. It was installed there because there is an enormous rock beneath the surface called Stannard Rock, and ships would constantly crash into it. So in the early 1900s, this was a necessity for the transit on the Great Lakes. It was incredibly hard to construct. It took 5 years, and it was a feat of engineering. They had to build each piece of the lighthouse on shore and bring it out into the middle of Lake Superior to set it up. Lighthouse keepers who lived there compared it to being buried alive. It was incredibly lonely, loud during the storms, thousands of seagulls crying, and it had a perpetual dampness. In 1913, there was almost 12 feet of ice completely covering the lighthouse, and the lighthouse keepers had to be rescued from it. In 1961, something in the basement exploded unexpectedly, killing one lighthouse keeper and creating a column of smoke straight through the interior of the lighthouse. After that, the lighthouse was automated. It was a silent husk sitting quietly in the middle of Lake Superior. Thanks for watching. You can find more of Great Lakes Now on YouTube or on greatlakesnow.org, and you can find more of my content, including Spooky Lake Month, on TikTok and Instagram.